Again, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking an opportunity to be here with us today and for participating in today's Fit for Learning webinar series. As you can see here, we are going to be talking a little bit about the debt cycle. We're going to talk about what it is, kind of what happens, and then we're going to walk through some different practical ways that you can kind of work through getting out of that debt cycle. And we're also going to give you some tips that hopefully will help you to just feel better about your overall financial situation, especially when we're talking specifically at some of the debt that you might be carrying. My name's Kyle Bingham. I am the managing director of our entire financial wellness program, and joining me today is John Poole. He is one of our education consultants, and he's somebody that has been in the industry for decades, and he's in the trenches and working with a lot of individuals. And so I'm looking forward to him kind of providing some of his insight over the years as he's been working with individuals to really kind of navigate through how to eventually pay off a person's debt. So there's 4 questions that we want to focus on. Like I said, we're going to start just by talking about what is the debt cycle, how does it work? Then we're going to move into what are some of the main causes of the debt cycle, what are some steps that we can take, what type of awareness do we need to have to be able to break out of that cycle, and then lastly we'll talk about what are some things that we can do to avoid getting stuck again. As we also kind of kick this off, I want to share just a couple quick thoughts. When you're looking at personal finance, I think that we can say that, quite frankly, 80% of personal finance focuses on the habits and behaviors that a person has, whereas only about 20% of personal finance really comes down to the knowledge that you have. And I think for today's topic, that's going to be particularly important, that rather than just look at ways to pay off your debt, what I would challenge all of you to think about more today is trying to gain a better awareness as to why are you in the situation that you're in, good or bad, and then really starting to look at what are some of these behaviors and what are some of these patterns that have kind of put me in the position that I'm in. If they're good behaviors, we want to continue to reinforce those, right? But if we do have some bad behaviors, we want to kind of be able to peel back some of the layers to really start to figure out what are some of these behaviors and habits that we need to change to get pointed back in the right direction. And so with that, what is the debt cycle itself? Think of it as a pattern where an individual is going to continuously borrow more money. They're going to struggle to be able to ever pay that debt off or that balance off. And in the process, they're actually incurring more debt. And so if you look at the flow chart here, a real simple example is when you look at a credit card, for an example. We're short on cash. What do? We're going to use credit. We're going to put something onto our credit card. And as you know, that interest is going to start to accrue. As that interest accrues, your balance is going to continue to grow. It's going to cause your monthly payments to go up. And then if there are no other changes to your income or any of your other expenses, when we get back up here to that top of that process, we're still short on cash, right? And so we continue to kind of get ourselves stuck in this process. And so part of it is identifying, again, why are we in this position, and then what is it going to take to be able to kind of break free of this? And this doesn't happen just with credit cards, for an example. Another way that we see from time to time is where a person has credit card debt and they use a debt consolidation loan, right? Which can be a useful tool. You get all of those credit cards paid off. Now you're just making one payment to that loan, for that debt consolidation loan. But then what happens? We start to use those credit cards again, right? Because we've got those big open balances. So now we have this loan that we're paying on, and now we continue to kind of get stuck in this cycle of using the credit card, not being able to pay it off. Balance gets bigger, Minimum payments continue to go up. And again, there's no changes to income or no reduction in any of your other expenses. So that's basically what the debt cycle is. There's, again, different ways that you can look at it, but I think that you kind of get the idea of what it is. And so that kind of takes me into what are some of the main causes of the debt cycle. First and foremost, overspending. I think that is definitely the obvious one. And John's going to get into a little bit more detail on how we can prevent ourselves from overspending. Another option, or another cause, I should say, instant gratification. And I think that this is a big one, that more so than ever, we live in this digital instant gratification world. Like, never has it ever been easier to get access to credit cards, to get access to credit lines. And it's almost like with a click of a button, you can open up a new credit card that you can then use to purchase a TV or whatever it is, that other type of big ticket item that you might be wanting. So we have to be mindful of that, because that's a double-edged sword. Unexpected expenses. This is another one, and again, we'll talk a little bit more as we get into some of the steps that you can take to help with this. But I've always said this, and many of you have probably heard me before, life does happen, and there are going to be unexpected expenses, without question. And very realistic expenses that need to be addressed. It could be a medical expense. It could be a home repair. It could be an auto repair. But once again, we see that some of these types of expenses typically are going to be larger, and we may not have that cash available to be able to cover that cost outright. So we see people at times that use a credit card or some other type of line of credit to be able to try to cover that unexpected expense. Minimum payments and interest rates kind of go together, and I know that we all kind of know the games that the credit card companies pay. And if all you're ever doing is making the minimum payment, and you know that you have a higher interest rate or a higher APR on that credit card, you are essentially in that debt cycle, right? Because if that minimum payment in some cases is barely even going to be able to cover the interest that's accruing on your account balance every month. And so without making a decision to either figure out how we can lower interest rates, we also have to figure out how much more we can pay in addition to just that minimum payment amount. So again, interest rates and minimum payments really go together in a lot of ways, and we need to address that. And then I also put on here poor financial management. And like I said, part of it is being able to have a knowledge of these things like budgeting and how to manage your cash flow. And I think the other side of it is when we see poor financial management, oftentimes it goes back to what that root cause is. What is the behavior? What is your attitude? What is that habit that continues to kind of get you in a bind? And so these are some of those root causes. And what I'd like to do now, I'm going to kick the time over to John for a little bit and have him kind of explain what are some of these steps that you can take to start to get a better handle on your debt and also break free of that cycle. So John, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kyle, and thanks again, everybody, for being here. So this is that part of the presentation. If you start out on a high point and then it kind of takes a dip, and then it's going to come back up at the end. This is that dip, because some of these things aren't really fun to talk about, but they're useful. They're needed if we're gonna take control of what we have going on financially and break that debt cycle. Been in this business. Some days it feels like forever, but I've been in this business a long time. And then even a few years before that, before I got into this business, I did know about budgeting, and I've never really loved sitting down and doing a budget. There may be people out there that do enjoy it, but it's necessary. We need to know, kind of what's coming in every 2 weeks or every month or every week, however you get paid. We need to know what's coming in And just as importantly, or maybe even more importantly, if we're trying to pay down debt, we need to know what's going out. What do we owe? So I would suggest that if you're just starting to take some steps towards breaking the debt cycle, getting control of this financial situation, is to, if you want to go analog, take a legal pad, or if you want to, break open a Word document, Excel spreadsheet, list all your debts. And especially in Excel, it's really easy. Put another column, the interest rate, put another column, the dollar amount, another column, your monthly payment, right? You get it. This is pretty elementary stuff. And I don't want to seem like I'm talking down to anybody here, because it's deceptively easy, it's deceptively basic. But what's not easy is actually taking action on it. And it's once you take that first step to writing down the debts and the interest and the total dollar amount owed and then your monthlies, that's going to really guide you towards making an effective budget. Not just knowing what's coming in and yeah, I've got my electric bill, I've got fuel for my vehicles, grocery bill, that's kind of variable, as is, electric bill, depending on what part of the country you live in with air conditioning and et cetera. We've got some variables, but we do need to account for how much we can allocate to actually paying down the prioritized debts. Which ones do we want to pay off first? Do we want to pay off the ones with the highest dollar amount or the biggest interest rate? How do we want to do that? Or do we want to start small? Well, there's two different ways. I've used both of them, by the way, in my personal life, and they both worked. And I've used them at different times. These methods that I've used, I'll call snowball and avalanche. Well, snowball, and I'll show you that in a second, the next slide, but a little bit better example of it. But in a nutshell, if I want to tackle the biggest debt that I have, that can be the highest interest rate or it can be the highest dollar amount, and I want to just get that one out of the way, then I'm going to really focus on not making that $50 a month minimum. No, I want to do as much over that minimum payment as I possibly can, because we know that if we're only making the minimum payments on, let's say, a store credit card or whatever it is, a credit card payment, if we only make the minimums, we will never get that card paid off. That's how it's set up. So anything that you pay above the minimum, and I know most people know this, but anything you pay above the minimum is actually going to slowly chip, or more than slowly, maybe quicker, chip away that total dollar amount balance. Me personally, I'll start with my highest interest rate debt because I really don't like paying interest. And so I want to get that out of the way first. And I've done that. So if I can pay $15 more than the minimum, double the minimum, whatever it is, you'll see some real progress. Now, the flip side, which I did when I was much younger, I had a small credit card out there, maybe $500–600. That was a small, maybe a $35, $40 monthly minimum payment. I doubled up on it. And so I wanted to get that small debt out of the way so I could have myself kind of a mental pat on the back. Hey, I paid off a credit card at 25 years old. None of my other 25, 24, 26-year-old friends are paying off credit cards. I feel like a king. I feel like a champion. I've done something. Now I can tackle that next one on my list. So if you want to go for the gold, take out that biggest one out there, great, avalanche. If you want to start small to get that feeling that, yes, I've done it, I can do it, and I can move on to the next, that's what we would call the snowball. And then you always want to update that monthly budget. I'll say monthly budget. Maybe you want to look at it every couple of weeks. If you have an accountability partner, maybe someone in your household, a spouse, a partner, a roommate, whatever the situation is, or if you can have somebody that is something of an accountability partner, that can help also. If you're like me and you don't want people in your business, you need to stay on top of it every couple of weeks or at least every month, right? So make sure that you update that as you pay off those debts, and consistency is key. It's very, very difficult to start this process. We know that. But if you start it, and if you have a realistic view of the debts that you want to tackle and what the priority of them is, then you can start on it, and then try to set yourself a personal schedule, 2, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever your feeling is, to follow up on it and act accordingly. And I'll show you this next slide, which is going to be just an example of the snowball versus avalanche. Now, you may be saying, John, where's that 14.65% credit card? I'll take 2, right? Well, add 10% on that. That's going to be your Best Buy credit card. So you can attack that highest interest rate, because that's a huge thing for me. I just want to get that one out of the way, right? God, let's attack that. If I've got that minimum payment of $65, now note, it's not the largest dollar amount. We put it as the largest interest rate, right? Because that's what was important to me in this example. We could maybe spend, $35 more on that minimum payment and make it an even 100 maybe to pay that off, and that'll really get you going. John, I can't afford that. I can only do a little bit. Hey, every little bit extra counts, because if you only pay the minimums, remember, you're not going to get ahead. So pick one, pay as much as you can over that minimum without putting yourself into a bind. You don't want to eat rice and beans every pay period for 6 months, right? I mean, unless you're including with some fajitas, okay? But don't put yourself into a bind, but do what you can. Now, the flip side, as we see on the bottom, that is your starting with the smallest, and we started with the smallest dollar amount. That's a credit card of $5,000. Yeah, it's the same line there, but stay with me. If we can just start with the smallest one, pay that off quickly first, mentally you're going to know, you know what, I did it. When other people didn't have faith in me, or when I didn't have faith in myself, or everything was working against me, the universe wasn't working. You know what? It worked because you took that smallest one, you took those steps, and you got it done. You can do it, but it takes that assessing what you have, what you're prioritizing, and then working your plan and being consistent with checking up on it.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, John, for kind of walking through some of those tips and those steps. I think one other point that I'll add into here is, as you're starting with your strategy and your repayment plan, one of the keys to success is, after that first debt is paid off, that whatever you were paying, that's not just extra money that you can kind of go and do whatever with. It's really important that that dollar amount then rolls into a part of the payment that you're making on that next debt. And I think that's sometimes that's where some of that misstep comes in, that we start to make some progress, we start to get something paid off, but then it is just a matter of kind of losing focus or not remaining disciplined and saying, okay, I was paying $100 on this card, now this card's paid off, I'm going to take this $100 on top of whatever I was paying on that next debt and continue to chip away at those. So just, something to be mindful of as you kind of start to look at this. I think in some cases too, I think that people have questions around lump sums. And I think a lump sum can also be a great way to be able to attack some of your debt. And I think you can look at it from both of these different perspectives and try to prioritize. Am I trying to save money through interest? Or, as John talked about with the snowball, maybe it's just a matter of getting some momentum and just feeling like, wow, I paid that first card off. There's a lot to be said about something like that to kind of help to get you motivated and keep you motivated. And there's not going to be a right or wrong answer when it comes to kind of how you're going to really go about looking at all of this. Now, I want to spend a few minutes here talking about this next piece of how do we avoid falling back into the debt cycle. And again, I'll preface with saying too that I think that we try to be very sensitive to the fact that the large majority of individuals that we work with have some form of debt or another. And we know that there are challenges that some of you might be facing, whether it be from a job or employment standpoint, whether it be interest rates, whether it be inflation. And so I think the big first step is just taking that time to actually put that plan together and to implement some of those tips that John talked about today. I think I think a lot of times there are psychological barriers that some folks face. One of those being just simply avoidance, right? You know you have debt, but you just maybe you let your spouse or partner handle it, or you're not really in the loop, or maybe you're like, I know I'm in debt, and it's easier if I just don't think about it. And what I want you to do is to kind of try to flip that avoidance mindset and really look at, where am I at right now? How can I essentially kind of hit the refresh button or reset button and just start to chip away slowly on this. Another piece of falling back into the debt cycle, I like to call it lifestyle inflation. What typically happens when when a lot of people get a raise or start making more money? Do we save whatever increase, or do we start to spend more money? And a lot of times it's we spend what we make, and that's kind of this concept of lifestyle inflation. And so when we are also looking at our income, and when we're looking at our budgeting and our income and expenses, the next time that you do have a bonus or an increase or a cost of living adjustment, make that piece or that dollar amount or that percentage be what you take and directly allocate that towards paying down some of your debt, as opposed to just continuing to spend more. I think that that's another easy tip or something that we want to try to avoid. And I alluded to it a little bit earlier, and I want to revisit this one too, because we see this a lot too, and that's a debt consolidation misstep. And that's where we find a debt consolidation loan. It's a great interest rate. It's a manageable monthly payment. It cleans up 2, 3, maybe 4 credit cards. But then after we do that, we have that tendency to go back to using those credit cards again and essentially kind of put ourselves right back into that position. So if you are in a situation where you're looking to consolidate some of that debt, again, the message here is have a plan and stick to that plan, because at the end of the day, being consistent and persistent when it comes to any aspect of your financial plan, especially with managing your debt, that really is the key to that. And John, I know you had a couple other thoughts as well. So what are some things that you would encourage folks to be thinking about to kind of help them to not go back into that debt cycle?
Yeah, it's sometimes we can be our own worst enemies. And, if you do have things that happen in life, like Kyle said, life happens, and, it's not that, oh, I paid off my XYZ store credit card and I saw some new electronic something that I absolutely need, and I got a raise, so I'll rationalize it that way. And then you rack those credit cards back up. Well, that's a behavior thing, and that's maybe taking a step back and saying, hey, wait, do I need that, or can I, save up a little bit more and just buy it outright, et cetera. But there are some things that happen that can put you back into debt that you shouldn't beat yourself up about. And I'm talking specifically about medical debt. If something happens and in your medical plan, maybe you've got X amount of dollars that's going to be out of pocket before that 80/20 kicks in, right? Or before your deductible is met. I don't know about you, but I don't have $2,000 in my back pocket, or $1,000 in my back pocket. So that could throw you a curveball. And if that happens, pretty common when those medical expenses happen, don't get too down on yourself. Just as if you were paying off that credit card or attacking something that we had talked about before, attack that medical debt the same way. No matter the type of debt, whether it's fun stuff, oh, I'm getting a new car, or not fun stuff, oh, I've got $1,700 in an unexpected medical expense. Debt is going to happen. We all have some sort of debt in one way or another. I'm going to see somebody's hand go up. John, I don't have debt. You're the one person. But for the rest of us, right, we're going to have it. So as long as we stick with the plan and we work it, and then keep going down the list of whatever our plan is, it's attainable. Just don't get too down on yourself. Be patient with yourself and work your plan.
Exactly, John. That's a great point, and I'll just reemphasize that as well. Is that the goal is to definitely get to the point where we tackle most or all of our debts, right? To be able to not have, some of the stress and the burden that comes with managing debt. But the reality of it is, as John said, so many of us do have debt, and we also have to learn how to live with that. And it shouldn't be this feeling of feeling so overwhelmed and frustrated and upset, because we also, and part of what we do, part of what John and all of our other consultants do, is to help you to still enjoy life, still be able to do those things and help you to budget, to have money, to have that enjoyment, but at the same time, you're also being responsible with any new debt that you might be taking on, and avoiding going further into debt, and making that debt just be a part of your overall financial plan. And I think that that's really the hope is to be able to balance those out. We're not saying don't ever have any fun and don't ever, spend money on something that you've always wanted, but it's being smart about it and really going back to that root cause. If there's something going on that clearly has had a negative impact on your behavior or your habits, let's start looking at how to get back on track. And with that, our consultants are always available to be able to sit down and have a conversation with you. Again, there's no cost to this, and so if you're thinking through your situation right now and you'd like to go ahead and start to look at your debt in a little bit more detail, maybe weigh the pros and cons of some of the different repayment strategies, feel free to scan that QR code there. John or one of his colleagues would be more than happy to sit down and really help you out. And again, we're looking at it from an objective standpoint, right? We just want to help you to feel confident and feel like you're making the right decision, regardless of where you're currently at. And with that, I do want to segue into this because I think this is going to be really important. I think this will be beneficial for a lot of you after the conversation that we've had today, which is our Fit for Learning in June is going to be how to navigate major purchases, right? That we talked about that today. Sometimes these major purchases are the things that set us back and put us further into debt. So next month, June 26th, we're going to be talking about how to navigate that process, how to be responsible in what you purchase and what the price is for that. So be sure, if you haven't registered already, again, scan that QR code, and we would be more than happy to talk through navigating purchases next month in June. And with that, folks, thank you all so much for your time. We'll look forward to hearing from some of you, and if there's anything else that you need from us, don't hesitate to reach out, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again for attending. Bye-bye.